The chill of November was settling in, turning the world into a canvas of muted colors. The leaves, once vibrant, now crunched beneath my footsteps as I walked down a desolate path surrounded by skeletal trees. Little did I know that this cold November night would become a stage for true fall horror stories that would send shivers down my spine. As darkness descended, I found myself navigating the narrow trail that wound through the heart of an ancient forest. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows that danced among the skeletal branches. The air itself seemed to carry a whisper of secrets as I trudged deeper into the woodland, the rustle of leaves and the distant hooting of an owl the only sounds that broke the silence. As I ventured further into the woods, a strange unease settled over me. The once familiar trail became a labyrinth of shadows, and a distant fog clung to the trees like ghostly fingers. The wind carried with it an indistinct murmur, a haunting melody that seemed to echo through the stillness of the night. The true horror of that cold November night began when I stumbled upon an ancient cemetery nestled within the heart of the forest. Tombstones, weathered by time, stood like silent sentinels in the moonlight. The air within the cemetery seemed charged with an otherworldly energy, and an invisible force seemed to pull me towards the forgotten graves. As I walked among the moss-covered tombstones, the air became thicker with a spectral presence. The moonlight revealed indistinct shapes, shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Whispers, unintelligible and haunting, echoed through the cemetery, and an inexplicable sorrow settled in the pit of my stomach. In the midst of the graveyard, a single grave captured my attention. The tombstone bore no name, only a faded inscription that spoke of a tragedy that had befallen a family lost to time. The ghostly whispers seemed to converge around this unmarked grave, their mournful cries painting a picture of a life cut short. A cold wind swept through the cemetery, extinguishing the lanterns that adorned the graves. Panic set in as the graveyard plunged into darkness, the moonlight obscured by a thick blanket of clouds. The whispers intensified, now forming into mournful wails that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath my feet. Summoning every ounce of courage, I retraced my steps through the cemetery, the spectral energy clinging to me like an unseen shroud. The air itself seemed to resist my escape, and the once familiar trail became an impenetrable maze. The forest, now transformed into a realm of the supernatural, seemed determined to ensnare me within its haunted embrace. As I stumbled through the darkness, a flickering light appeared in the distance. A dilapidated cabin emerged from the shadows, its windows glowing with an otherworldly light. Desperation fueled my journey towards this spectral refuge, and as I approached, the cabin seemed to materialize from the very fabric of the night. The door creaked open as I entered the cabin, the interior cloaked in a dim glow. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, and the only sound was the distant howl of the wind outside. The cabin, though seemingly abandoned, bore the traces of a haunting past, forgotten relics and tattered furnishings that hinted at the lives once lived within. As I explored the cabin, a distant thud echoed through the silence. Panic seized me as I realized I was not alone. The ghostly residue of the cabin seemed to converge, creating an atmosphere charged with an otherworldly energy. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a spectral force, and a sense of being watched settled over me. In a room at the end of a darkened corridor, I discovered an old photograph. The image captured a family, their faces distorted by an otherworldly mist. The air seemed to thicken as I gazed upon their spectral forms, and a haunting voice spoke of a tragedy that had befallen them within the very walls of the cabin. The ghostly residue began to weave a tale of darkness, a family that had sought refuge in the cabin, only to fall victim to an unseen malevolence. The cabin, now a vessel for the echoes of their torment, bore witness to a tragedy that transcended the boundaries of the living and the spectral. As I tried to leave the cabin, a spectral force seemed to resist my escape. The door, once a gateway to safety, became a barrier between the haunted interior and the darkness outside. Panic set in as I felt the ghostly residue tighten its grip, and the very walls of the cabin seemed to close in around me. Summoning every ounce of willpower, I forced open the door and stumbled into the cold night air. The forest, now shrouded in an impenetrable darkness, seemed to echo with the mournful cries of the ghostly residue. The lesson learned in that chilling encounter was undeniable. The past, when tainted by tragedy, can leave behind imprints that defy
the boundaries of time and reality. As I made my way through the oppressive darkness, the ghostly wails lingered like a haunting melody, a constant reminder of the true fall horror stories that had unfolded on that cold November night. The forest, once a familiar path, had become an impenetrable maze. The skeletal trees loomed overhead like twisted sentinels, their branches casting elongated shadows that seemed to reach out like ghostly fingers. The wind carried with it the residual whispers of the graveyard, creating an otherworldly symphony that intensified the sense of foreboding. With each step, the spectral energy clung to me, a ghostly residue that seemed to blur the line between the living and the supernatural. The moon, obscured by heavy clouds, offered little solace as I stumbled through the night, guided only by the haunting echoes that reverberated through the forest. Suddenly, a clearing emerged in the darkness, revealing a desolate field bathed in the cold glow of the moonlight. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching skyward like twisted fingers. A thick fog enveloped the field, creating an ethereal atmosphere that sent shivers down my spine. As I approached the ancient oak, the ghostly residue seemed to converge around its twisted roots. The air became charged with an unseen force, and a faint light emanated from the very heart of the tree. The whispers, now distinct and urgent, spoke of a ritual performed centuries ago, a ritual that bound the forest to the supernatural. Compelled by an inexplicable force, I reached out to touch the ancient oak. The moment my fingers made contact, a surge of spectral energy coursed through me. Visions of the past flashed before my eyes, hooded figures performing an otherworldly ceremony, their voices raised in an ethereal chant. The ritual, intended to harness the power of the supernatural, had gone awry, leaving behind a ghostly residue that clung to the very fabric of the forest. The ancient oak, now a conduit for the echoes of the past, stood as a testament to the consequences of meddling with forces beyond human comprehension. Panic set in as I realized the ritual's lingering effects had ensnared me within its spectral grasp. The fog thickened, creating an impenetrable barrier that obscured the clearing. The haunting cries of the ghostly residue intensified, echoing through the night like a chorus of the damned. Driven by a desperate need to break free from the supernatural web, I retraced my steps through the forest. The skeletal trees seemed to close in around me, their twisted branches forming a spectral canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The very ground beneath my feet felt alive with unseen forces, as if the forest itself resisted my escape. Through the oppressive darkness, I glimpsed the distant glow of the cemetery. The very thought of returning to the graveyard sent chills down my spine, but it seemed to be the only path out of the haunted forest. The ghostly residue clung to me like a relentless shadow, its whispers guiding me back to the ancient burial ground. As I entered the cemetery once more, the fog lifted, revealing the moss-covered tombstones and the unmarked grave. The moonlight cast an ethereal glow, illuminating the spectral figures that lingered among the graves. The ghostly residue, now a swirling mist, seemed to converge around the unmarked grave, as if beckoning me to uncover the untold secrets buried within. Summoning the courage to confront the supernatural forces at play, I approached the unmarked grave. The ghostly residue intensified, and the mournful cries seemed to echo with a sense of urgency. With trembling hands, I began to dig beneath the cold earth, uncovering a hidden chamber that lay beneath the forgotten tomb. To my horror, the chamber revealed an ancient relic, a cursed artifact that had been buried with the family entwined in the tragic tale. The ghostly residue, now a swirling vortex, spiraled around the artifact, its malevolent energy pulsating through the very air. The artifact, tainted by the consequences of the long-forgotten ritual, seemed to hold the key to breaking the spectral web that ensnared me. With a surge of determination, I seized the cursed artifact and uttered words that echoed with an otherworldly power. The ghostly residue recoiled, its haunting cries silenced as the artifact absorbed the supernatural energy that bound the forest. The ancient oak, once a conduit for the echoes of the past, trembled as the spectral forces dissipated into the night. As the last traces of the ghostly residue faded, a profound stillness settled over the cemetery. The moonlight bathed the tombstones, revealing the solemn faces of the spectral figures that lingered among the graves. The once haunted forest now stood silent, and a sense of peace replaced the oppressive darkness that had pervaded the night. The lesson learned in that chilling encounter was profound. Meddling with forces beyond comprehension carries consequences that linger through time. The ancient ritual, meant to harness supernatural power, had left behind a legacy of haunting echoes that transcended generations. The cursed artifact, now in my possession, served as a reminder that some secrets are better left undisturbed. As I walked away from the cemetery, the night air seemed to carry with it a lingering whisper, a spectral acknowledgement of the lessons learned in the haunted forest. The ghostly residue, once a malevolent force, had been vanquished, and the forest stood as a testament to the delicate balance between the living and the supernatural. The November night, now devoid of the haunting echoes, felt cold but no longer oppressive. The lessons learned in the spectral embrace of the forest lingered like a ghostly residue, a cautionary tale of the consequences of unraveling the threads that bind the natural and supernatural realms. The ancient oak, once a conduit for the echoes of the past, now stood as a solemn guardian, its twisted branches reaching towards the heavens in a silent prayer for peace. The lingering chill of November cast a pall over the small town, where the withered leaves crunched beneath my footsteps. The streets, lined with barren trees, painted a somber picture as I navigated through the deserted alleys. Little did I know that this cold November night would weave a tapestry of true fall horror stories, unraveling the boundaries between reality and the supernatural. As I ventured deeper into the heart of the town, a dilapidated mansion emerged on the outskirts. Its imposing silhouette stood as a relic of a forgotten era, its windows shattered and its walls cloaked in a tattered veil of ivy. The moon, obscured by heavy clouds, cast an eerie glow upon the mansion, and an ominous stillness settled in the air. Driven by a curiosity that bordered on the reckless, I approached the mansion's grand entrance. The rusty gate groaned as I pushed it open, and the wind whispered through the overgrown gardens like a ghostly melody. The air itself seemed to carry the weight of untold stories, as if the mansion held the echoes of a forgotten past. The creaking door offered reluctant entry into the mansion's decaying foyer. Dust motes danced in the dim light, revealing the abandoned grandeur that once graced the hallways. A chill ran down my spine as I stepped further into the mansion, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight. The true horror unfolded as I ascended the grand staircase, each step echoing through the silence like a solemn drumbeat. The walls, adorned with faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors, seemed to gaze disapprovingly at the intruder who dared to disturb their long-forgotten abode. As I explored the upper floors, a sense of unease settled over me. The rooms, once filled with life, now stood frozen in time. The faded wallpaper peeled away like the memories that clung to the mansion's walls. An indistinct whisper, a ghostly residue of forgotten conversations, seemed to resonate through the empty chambers. In a dimly lit room, I discovered an ancient diary lying on a dusty writing desk. The pages, brittle and yellowed, detailed the tragic tale of the mansion's last inhabitants, a family tormented by a malevolent force that defied explanation. The ghostly residue seemed to intensify as I read the harrowing accounts of inexplicable phenomena and unrelenting nightmares that drove the family to the brink of madness. The diary spoke of a curse that had befallen the mansion, a darkness that fed on the fears of those who dared to step beyond its threshold. As I delved further into the chilling entries, the air in the room seemed to thicken with an unseen presence. Whispers echoed through the corridors, and a ghostly residue manifested in the flickering candlelight. The supernatural force that haunted the mansion had claimed the lives of its inhabitants, trapping their souls within its malevolent grasp. The ghostly residue, a manifestation of their torment, seemed to cling to me like an invisible shroud. Panic set in as I realized that the curse, undeterred by the passage of time, sought to entangle me within its spectral web. Summoning every ounce of courage, I sought to unravel the mystery of the mansion's curse. The diary spoke of a hidden chamber in the depths of the mansion, a place where the supernatural force had first awakened. With trepidation, I descended into the cold, dark underbelly of the mansion, where the ghostly residue seemed to converge. The hidden chamber revealed itself as a vault of forgotten horrors. Symbols etched into the stone walls hinted at a ritual gone awry, a dark ceremony that had unleashed the malevolent force that now haunted the mansion. The ghostly residue intensified, swirling around the chamber like a malevolent storm. As I stood in the heart of the chamber, the supernatural force seemed to awaken. The temperature plummeted, and an otherworldly wind howled through the stone corridors. The curse, now fully aware of my presence, sought to claim me as its next victim. With a desperate resolve, I unearthed an ancient artifact hidden within the chamber. The artifact, tainted by the malevolent force, pulsed with an eerie energy. The ghostly residue recoiled as I held the artifact aloft, its whispers replaced by an otherworldly scream that echoed through the mansion. The lesson revealed itself in that chilling moment. The curse that bound the mansion was a manifestation of the pain and suffering endured by its former inhabitants. The supernatural force, fueled by unresolved grievances, sought to ensnare the living in a never-ending cycle of torment. With the artifact in hand, I uttered words of release, a plea for the spirits to find peace. The mansion shook as if in protest, the malevolent force resisting its banishment. The ghostly residue, now a tempest of ethereal energy, swirled around me like a final, desperate cry for recognition. As the artifact absorbed the spectral energy, a blinding light filled the hidden chamber. The curse, broken by the release of the trapped souls, dissipated into the void. The mansion, once haunted by the echoes of a tragic past, stood silent, its walls free from the malevolent force that had bound it for centuries. With the breaking of the curse, the ghostly residue that clung to me began to fade. The air in the mansion lightened, and the oppressive darkness lifted. The once haunted chambers now seemed almost serene, as if the spirits of the past had finally found solace in their release. As I emerged from the hidden chamber, the moon shone through the broken windows, casting a gentle glow upon the now silent mansion. The lessons learned in that haunted abode were profound. The consequences of unresolved pain and suffering could transcend the boundaries of life and death, manifesting as a malevolent force that sought to perpetuate its torment. As I walked away from the mansion, the night air carried with it a residual chill, a reminder of the true fall horror stories that unfolded within its decaying walls. The ghostly residue, once a relentless force, now seemed to dissipate into the night, leaving behind